Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cut to the Chase. My name is Jeremiah Rowe, and I'm one of our field CISOs here at Synack. Today, we're going to be discussing several aspects around remediation, taking a look at some of the abilities to streamline those processes, what it looks like on the back end, how we can potentially do that in the Synack client portal, and a whole lot more. So stay tuned there. Also, if you're not too familiar with who Synack is, if this is your first time, Synack, we conduct strategic security testing at scale. So what does that mean if you're still not too sure? We utilize over 1,500 researchers in over 90 different countries. Of course, that can be scaled down depending on what your security requirements are. We utilize these researchers that are best in breed, tier one talent, to showcase the ability of testing at scale and what that looks like. If you're a little bit curious as to what that is, I've recently written a blog post called Getting the Right Pen Testing Tool Up Front Saves Money, Increases Resiliency. I'm going to drop that in the chat for everybody here shortly. 1 second. Let me get that put in. And you should be able to take a look at that if you'd like to. But real quick, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you have any questions or you want to communicate with us, go ahead and utilize the side function to pass over any questions, and we can go ahead and get to those here in a little bit. For now, I'm going to switch over to our client portal here in the Synack client portal. This is our platform we utilize. But before we jump into a few things here, I want to just discuss typical remediation inside of environments and what that kind of looks like. So some of you know I come from the pen testing space, red team operations space. And whenever I used to be hands-on keyboard, we would obviously find exploitable vulnerabilities. Now, these vulnerabilities, once we've identified them, it would go through a process of reporting them, writing them up, and passing them over to our plan of action and milestone team, our POAM team. Now, this is a more advanced or more mature security program that we ran. And so we had a team that was specifically devoted to tracking down system owners, developers, teams that are responsible for fixing and remediating these things. Even then, it could take weeks, if not months, to sometimes remediate things. And then it would get classified, lost in translation, and things were done from a very disjointed perspective. You would just basically shoot out emails. People would get pinged, wait a week, ping them again, wait a week, ping them again. It felt like a very unsophisticated way to get things done, not to mention not much oversight. Things aren't tracked appropriately. There's no data to back any of this up. And at the end of the day, it pushes out remediation efforts to longer and longer periods. So that being said, once a developer team got a hold of the patch, they would then, or the vulnerability, they would then work on creating a patch or mitigating the issue, and that could take however long that could take. Meanwhile, things are getting exploited. There's a whole time gap perspective that's unaccounted for, and it increases our risk across the board. So as CISOs and executive members of organizations, when we take a look at the risk that's spread across the organization, we have to account for time that's spent to fix that risk. And oftentimes that's something that is unaccounted for. We can measure what we can measure. And if we're not measuring for it, then we can't include it in the ability to measure risk for the organization appropriately. So that being said, inside the Synack client portal, we're going to take a little bit of a different track. I'm first going to highlight the vulnerability section because we're going to assume that you're conducting offensive security testing with Synack today. If you are, all of our vulnerabilities aggregate together under the vulnerabilities tab. Of course, you can scale these down based off of how you would like to set a workflow, or you can categorize and filter and sort these things based off of whatever you want. But if you're an administrator inside the Synack client portal, you're going to see the vulnerabilities, and these are exploitable vulnerabilities, by the way, exploitable from real human beings on the back end that exploit these things to the point of proving that it's exploitable and then submitting it along with the proof. So all of these things are going to aggregate across all assessments for you. There's a little bit of a different view that we can get into, which we'll go and showcase here in a minute. But as we take a look at these things, the submitted reports from the researchers are going to come through for you like this. You're going to see what kind of vulnerability it is, what applications in this case are vulnerable, what locations are, what the potential impact is, as well as details, vulnerable locations, specific requests that are associated with this thing, screenshots if it requires that, videos if it's a bit more complicated and we have to highlight more things to you. So you're going to get step-by-step processes on how to fix things, where you need to focus and what that entails, as well as a recommended fix and the CVSS ranking. Now, if you're operating from a typical perspective that we do see some clients, we see a mixture of clients operate from a typical standard approach where there's really no kind of strategy applied to it. But then we also see clients that will employ strategies and employ processes in a streamlined way to make themselves more efficient in the way they operate. And these teams that do that often find that they can leverage the data, collaborate across teams, and become way more effective in their reduction of risk across the environment when they do this. That being said, so we're going to assume that we're a typical team and we're operating the way that we would normally do. So generally you have a security engineer or an InfoSec team member managing this process. They come in, they're tasked with managing all of these things, taking a look at each exploitable finding as they come through, and they're going to then probably take this information, put it into another system that they work in manually, and then they're going to then take that and pass it through the normal process we just discussed a little bit ago, either through a POAM team or they're going to try to contact the development teams themselves. Now, when you do that, you've got a breakdown in their ability to operate efficiently, because they're also going to be tasked with managing vulnerabilities from, say, their scanners like Tenable, Acunetics, Nessus, whatever, and 200,000 potential vulnerabilities that might arise there. They're also going to be responsible for writing reports, having meetings, going through and doing fire drills that also happen to have 0-day patch releases and monitoring all these different information feeds. Maybe they're also responsible for submitting firewall changes and a whole slew and gamut of things. Well, when you have that process, maybe you got a 2 to 3 man team, these things get pushed off. And of course, that increases the risk for the whole organization. It's less efficient, it's less streamlined, and it doesn't produce a collaborative environment, which we all need. We know if you're working in InfoSec today and cybersecurity today, we can't do this alone. That this requires collaboration, it requires communication, and the ability to act across all teams within the environment. And if we're not doing that effectively, we're losing every time. So our goal at Synack is to help you fix that. And here's one of the ways we do that. Right now, we're going to go ahead and go into our backend system, which is our settings. And inside of our settings, we have a fun aspect of roles. Now you can choose between super admin, assessment member, assessment group admin, assessment read-only, assessment operator, infra admin, assessment creator. That's maybe confusing, but let me pare it down a bit more for you. Imagine you are a sole operator in a cyber team or InfoSec team, and you want to streamline your processes and become more efficient. Well, one of the best ways to do that is to increase collaboration across the board between all development teams and system administrators who would potentially be responsible for addressing vulnerabilities. And then we begin to onboard them into the Synack client portal, our platform here that you are administrator of, and you give them role-based access based off of the particular purview that they need to see. So, for instance, if we have Windows-based assessments and the sole responsible party for addressing Windows-based vulnerabilities is going to be the Windows Systems Administrator, then we go ahead and create an assessment group admin, and then maybe we create an assessment group, and we assign those system administrators as part of the Windows group to that group. And therefore, when a vulnerability, an exploitable finding comes in for that particular assessment, they'll get access to it immediately. They'll get an email for it, letting them know that they've got a particular finding that's exploitable, that's in these systems, all the details. They can log into their version of the platform, and it's refined down to only the information that they need to see, because not everybody needs to see everything. We can do the same thing across development teams. If we have different developers that are working on different applications and functional areas of the organization, we can create separate assessment groups and have assessment code names assigned to that, and then assign the developers to those specific assessment groups. And then all of a sudden, as soon as an exploitable finding comes through, they can immediately begin to address it. They can go through, they can collaborate with their own teams, they can begin to communicate inside of the exploitable findings that are theirs. When they open up the finding, it's going to look just like this. They're going to go through, see all this information. They're going to be able to click on screenshots if they're attached. They're going to be able to follow the steps to reproduce recommended fixes. And even then, they can kick off the patch request remediation process on our system as well. They can communicate with their other team members who have access. In addition, if they need additional information from the researcher who identified it, they can communicate with the researcher themselves directly through the Synack client portal right here by choosing the researcher messages. Now, once they feel like they fixed that thing, they can go through and they can request a patch verification, which they throw it into a closed fixed status, and this will go through and do a patch verification, meaning a retest. They can be responsible for these processes themselves. InfoSec and cybersecurity teams do not have to manage this whole process and do all of the steps themselves. We can begin to delegate or deputize individual team members from the development teams to go through these processes themselves. Let's train them, make them responsible for this stuff. We're all part of the same team. We all have an ownership over risk within the businesses in the organization, yet we don't figure out creative, streamlined, effective, efficient processes that allow us to save time on the back end and reduce the ability and close the gap on remediation timeframes, which again, always lets the attacker win. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and close this. Now, once we begin this process and we begin onboarding developers and developer teams to work on remediation with us as a team, we can open the bounds of communication. No longer are we creating these siloed environments where nobody communicates, nobody collaborates, and every team is out for themselves. And security is seen as the bad guy or gal, and developers are seen as ineffective and don't have the ability to effectively focus on things. But we can begin to close those gaps from a collaborative perspective and become more team-based. When you have a friend working in a program, you're more apt to go above and beyond for that friend. I'm saying let's build friends across the organization, across the teams, and begin to collaborate and work together more efficiently. And this is a process that can help you do that. Now, one of the other things that developers can do, obviously, once they begin to be onboarded as part of the Synack client portal and our platform, and they begin to get pings for the vulnerabilities that they have to address because they're exploitable, they can have a choice at that point, whether or not they want to operate from the Synack client portal or they want to automatically do things like developers do, which is great. We love that because it becomes faster, quicker, and more efficient. Well, we've also got the ability to do that as well through our Synack API on the back end. And so as exploits begin to funnel through, if the particular development team has a queue that they would like things to go into that they want to address, and they don't necessarily want to integrate into the Synack client portal, they just plug in through our API and begin to pull things down into their particular ticketing system that they want to work through in a more efficient, streamlined manner. Now, we've also got integrations into most things that are typically worked on from a developer perspective or a cybersecurity team perspective, things like Jira, Splunk. We also connect with Microsoft Sentinel and several other aspects as well. Now, these things are all meant to help you close the gap from time to remediate, to patch verification, and ensuring the attackers aren't getting the upper hand by our delayed remediation processes. Now, we can begin to measure these things and baseline these things right here from the main platform. And so imagine we don't have this process implemented yet, but yet you're regularly testing with Synack already. You can come here and set a baseline. What is your average remediation time today? In this case, let's assume it's 23 days. Your average remediation time frame is 23 days. From that, our patch efficacy is 30%. Now, we want this number to go down and this number to go up. We want a patch efficacy average of, 100% if we could. That just means that we're fixing it right the first time we do it. Remediation timeframes, we want to go down. We want those as low as possible because that's going to be a direct reflection of reduction in risk to the organization. Now, when we take a look at these aspects, we want to ensure that we set the baseline so we can adequately track what's happening. And so we begin to incorporate developers across our systems and systems administrators, and we begin setting role-based accesses and giving them the particular purviews that they need so they can manage the process themselves. I guarantee you that number is going to go down. And you're going to see an efficiency emerge from this process, closing the gaps and reducing risk. Now, that gives your CISO the ability to communicate effectively to the board. You show that to the board, reduction in risk, a reduction in average remediation time frame from this point to this point, and that board begins to see that the CISO is doing their mandate. They're fixing the deficiencies in the programs across the board, and they've got real data to back that up. On top of that, prior to doing that, we can begin to see the vulnerability categories where we have the most deficiencies in across the board, regardless of how our remediation timeframes are. And that gives further impetus to grow programs from the CISO perspective. There's one particular company that we worked with, I'm going to go through and discuss, that dealt with inconsistent functional deficiencies in the organization. Now, this is a business that had a couple different development teams. They did exactly what we're talking about here, and they onboarded the different developer teams to working on their own particular set of exploitable findings as they came through. We found in working collaboratively with them that they had Dev Team A had an 80% remediation rate. They were successful on the first attempt, so the patch efficacy. Then they had Dev Team C, which was a 30% on their first attempt. And they were able to take 3 attempts to reach 80% across the board, which directly relates to the inability to effectively remediate on the back end, close the gap within an acceptable time frame that's increasing streamlined processes. Now, after discussing this with both teams and then bringing to light, the InfoSec team happened to notice this. And in managing the process, they were able to take that data and effectively communicate with Dev Team A and Dev Team C and close the gap between the two dev teams to help them collaborate and figure out where the deficiencies were with Dev Team C. Ultimately, what this led to was Dev Team C was able to be retrained from Dev Team A, and it showed ongoing results of the 75% success rate within 45 days. That's outrageous. That's a win. That's closing the deficiencies within the organization and everybody working together to collaboratively fix these issues. Now, when we take a look at these things, we're not just looking looking at remediation rates. We're looking at the patch efficacies, the vulnerabilities that get patched, the root cause analysis of what's causing these issues. And all of these things together can collaboratively be thought of and put together in a strategic way so that we, one, stop producing vulnerabilities that are related to, say, our most efficient areas of, say, cross-site scripting, in this case, functional business logic flaws, remote code execution, SQL injection. You've all heard of the OWASP top 10. Well, this is the Synack top 10 for your environment. You can take this, leverage this, and begin to retrain developers or those who are responsible for these particular code bases that are having these flaws, and get them additional secure coding practices if needed. Not only are we collaborating, not only are we friends, not only are they onboarded into the Synack client portal, but you're beginning to work on things across the board in a more efficient and streamlined way. So these are some of the ways that we can take a look at and help to finish the process. In addition to that, we've also got what we call our attacker resistance score. These are some of the additional things that we can utilize to showcase what's being hardened within the environment, how hard those assets are, meaning how much effort does it take for an attacker to get into those particular systems. We take the average time calculated together from a group of researchers, what types of vulnerabilities they're submitting on those particular assets or the assessments, and what the difficulty level, CVSS rankings, those are. And we collaboratively take that together to produce an attacker resistance score. Now, this represents a number across the whole organization that is predicated on the systems that we're already testing. And so we go from a 0 to 100 hardness. In this case, this is an 85 hardness level across the board. That's actually really good. The assessment scores individually will be ranked based off of their hardness, in addition to the weakest assets across the board. Now, this gives you the strategic ability to focus where you want to begin your remediation efforts first, based off the weakest assets that are showcased inside of your environment. This, coupled with a continued collaboration with development teams, is going to further close the gap, because it's about finding the ways we can thwart the efforts from the bad guy or girl that's out there in the industry today, advanced persistent threat that's focusing on targeting our environments. Becoming more efficient, streamlined, fixing things faster, more effectively, and doing it in a way that makes us less susceptible over time. These attacks aren't going to stop. If you're paying attention, attackers aren't going away. Exploitable findings are only increasing. And the only thing we can do is become more efficient, more streamlined, and more effective in the way that we're addressing them, implying strategy in the way we deal with them, and learning from the data that can be produced from them to better ensure our environments and our businesses are becoming more effectively secure over time. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and pause to see if we have any questions that are left inside of the time frame that we have left. I'm going to switch back to our main camera, and feel free, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them now, and I can go ahead and get them answered for you. So we kind of hang out here for a moment. If you got coffee, take a drink of coffee. Thank you all so much for taking some time out of this morning to spend with me to go over some of the perspectives that we've got. I'm obviously a huge fan of Synack. I've been here for a while. I've come from previous organizations, conducted offensive operations myself, and I see huge value in the way that you can leverage data. In previous iterations of conducting offensive operations, from offensive security testing, there's always been that lack of data being collected on the back end. It's been submit a report, black hole, nobody knows what's going on. Conduct offensive security testing, and there's no perspectives anywhere. We lose this whole insight trail and then that can't be leveraged to strategically do anything on the back end. Yeah, we get a report that shows where vulnerabilities are, but we don't learn anything from it. We don't fix the processes that led to where we were to begin with. We just keep staying where we were and doing repetitive processes again on the back end, which doesn't help anybody ultimately. So we give it a few more minutes. If there are any questions, please feel free to go ahead and ask them in the Q&A session, and we'll get to them. Speaking of offensive operations and offensive testing and hacking, we will be over at Black Hat this year. If you're planning on attending, please swing by our booth. You were going to have an awesome one. I'll just say that without sort of spilling the beans for anybody. In years past, we've had some amazing booths. Last year, we had a jungle theme booth. This year is going to be amazing as well. And so if you're curious as to learning more from Synack or meeting myself and others, then go ahead and swing by our booth at Black Hat. So we had a question come through. What integrations do you have to help with remediation? Thank you very much. That's a great question. So I'm going to swing back to our platform here and go through some of the integrations that we have again. So we'll go to settings, integrations, and of course, we've got Jira, Splunk, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. We can connect to Microsoft Sentinel, connect to Azure DevOps, connect to ServiceNow, Invicti, Qualys, ServiceNow, and of course, you can request additional integrations if you'd like to. With Jira, I would say Jira, we've got a bidirectional communication there for anything that comes into the Synack client portal will automatically get pushed out to Jira. You can work on it, and whatever changes that are made there will also bidirectionally be pushed back into the Synack client portal, respectively. Of course, Splunk has a very similar integration with the data that it can pull down. You can work with Splunk, and a lot of teams that I know will pull out insights and unique things from Splunk themselves. And of course, the rest of the things that you see here. But further, we have the ability to hook into our Synack API. This is a very underutilized, very powerful tool that allows you to pull unique information, build your own insights. And of course, most developers would agree they would like to have access to the raw data as it comes in so that they can individually pull the insights and figure out creative ways of collecting information themselves. There's a unique feature. I'm not sure if you've heard of what is it, Graphy or yeah, I think it's Graphy, which allows you to open source, pull some tools to build graphs and metrics and insights yourself. You can take the API collector, hook that into that particular tool, and build out unique metrics and insights that we don't even have, or metrics and insights that are unique to your particular organization just by collecting the data that you would like so that you can mature your processes even further. You'd be amazed with some of the information that you can get from the raw data itself. But that being said, the direct integrations that we have, I'm sorry, a little bit of a tangent, are Jira, Splunk. You kind of went through that a little bit ago. Hope that answered your question. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, we've got about 50 seconds left. In that time, I just wanted to, again, thank you so much. And I hope you all have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this session. And if you got suggestions for any sessions you'd like to see in the future, please reach out to us. Let us know. Communicate. We'd love to have that collaboration as we talked about earlier. Thank you so much and have a great day.